Yo, what's up, gang? I hope y'all are enjoying y'all's day. I just wanted to say thank y'all for 100 subscribers, and you know I'm gonna keep on pumping out that great content, or I'm gonna keep on trying. I got my boy Ducky over here, and we're gonna be watching this video with y'all. It's NXT Greatest Champions. Let's go ahead and check that bitch out. Roll it.
We often think about
Shout my brother wrestling with Andy, and of course we like the video because that's what we do when we react. Let's hop straight into it, rodeo style.
the holders of the Universal and World Heavyweight belts. However, it's not only
I
the main
love
roster
that title.
had a number of fantastic champions over the years.
Makes me want to come.
NXT has had their fair share of great title holders too. But who
What
are
did
the
he
best
say?
NXT champions of all time? Well,
Delete
that's
that.
exactly what we are going to be looking at today. And where better to start than with the current champion, Ilya Dragunov. Yes, well, the main ongoing storyline of NXT over the last several months has been the Carmelo
Oh,
Hayes Trick Williams
my cat
program.
wants to
It's actually
be in
neither
the
of them
video.
who hold
I
the
don't know
top
if y'all can
prize.
see him,
Rather, that's being
but
held
he's
by
right
the
under
man
my
no
mic.
one can beat purely because he's so tough, Ilya Dragunov. That's right, outside of Gunther, there may not be a harder hitting person in all of WWE today. And this can be seen in almost all of the champ's title defenses, as he usually leaves his opponents a bloody mess by the time things are said and done. It doesn't matter if it's Baron Corbin, Ridge Holland, or anyone else who's wanted to step up, they've all felt the wrath of the Mad Dragon. The only question is, can anyone stop him at this point? After all, he's already held the title for 156 days and counting as of the time of this video's recording. And if we're being honest, while he's had some tough challengers, no one's really come close to beating him yet. No, it might take a force of nature or an act of God to bring the Moscow native down the way things stand right now, as there's no one more legit on the roster when it
My
comes to
cat's
delivering
just
a beating
loving
on
on
his
me.
opponents. Truly then, once all is said and done, we wouldn't be surprised
He's
if
laying
Ilya
down now.
Dragunov went down as the greatest NXT World Champion of all time. But that's not to say he won't have strong competition for this spot, because our next subject also holds a claim to that spot. So, who are we
Finn.
talking about here? Why, Finn Balor, of course. Now, we're sure you remember the black and gold era of NXT, the period when, with WWE's main roster
Talk about the GOAT era. The GOAT era of NXT. Not this trashy white version. And I don't even know what I call it now. But Nikita Lyons is fine.
being at its worst and AEW yet to form, it was easily the best wrestling you were going to see on North American soil each week. And during that era, there were a lot of great performers who passed through the halls of Full Sail University and even went on to hold the top prize. That said,
For a
of those
second, I
people,
thought that was
perhaps none
Enzo.
did as much to elevate the belt as Finn Balor did. After all, during his first run with it between July 4th, 2015 and
Finn.
April 21st, 2016, he pretty much carried the brand on his back and turned it into a legitimate
Prince
touring
Devin.
sensation, with his 292-day reign being the longest fans had ever
Look
seen
at you
at the
go.
time. And the way he
Bullet
held it for so long
Club.
was by having better matches than you were going to see anywhere else. Of course, it helped he had his great demon gimmick too to bust out whenever it was time for a big event, but by the time his second run with it in September of 2020, he wouldn't even need this. No, by that point, after having established himself on the main
Finn's
roster
just a
and returning to the development in order
badass.
to refresh himself once more, he'd forego the
Badass.
demon entirely and instead take up the moniker of the Prince, a nod to his old days as Prince Devitt. And to be honest, while it came during a dark time for the world, you could argue this run was even better than his first, as here we got a whole new side of Balor we'd yet to see in New York, one which gave us two Match of the Year contenders in the form of his bouts with Kyle O'Reilly. Unfortunately though, while this was certainly a high point for NXT, it would also mark one of the last gasps of the black and gold era, as soon after Finn lost the belt and returned to the main roster, the whole brand would be morphed into its early 2.0 incarnation.
Why? Why?
But while this wasn't as beloved by many fans, it did give us a great champion in our next subject,
Yeah, Braun.
Breaker.
Shopify helps you sell at every stage of your business. Like that ready to launch stage.
That's right, during
That man legitimately just stated facts, though. Like, I don't like NXT, 2.0. I really don't. But Carmelo Hayes, Trick Williams, and Braun Breaker, they be carrying that show. And whenever Dominic was on that show, Dirty Doms everywhere, baby.
NXT 2.0's early days, the son of Rick Steiner was there to keep the ship afloat. As being the physical phenomenon he was at least able to add some legitimacy to the then struggling brand by carrying their world title on 2 separate occasions between January of 2022 and April of 2023.
Because he lost
Hell, were it
to
not for him
Dolph.
being there to act as a buffer until we could reach the Shawn Michaels era, the whole enterprise could very well have collapsed as audience interest was at an all-time low. But he was there, and he was able to show why he's one of WWE's fastest rising stars today by having some great matches.
And to clarify, 2.0 is Vince's era. I would call this era gold and white. I don't know what to call it, but it's Shawn Michaels' era. Shawn Michaels is so much better. And Nikita Lyons, call my phone.
Against the likes of Santos Escobar, Joe Gacy, and Dolph Ziggler. And as if that weren't enough, it was also Braun who was responsible for unifying the NXT and NXT UK world titles at this point when he defeated Tyler Bate at September 4th,
I'm not
2022's Worlds Collide show to take home both straps. So while his run may not have
Please.
come during the best of eras in many fans' eyes, to not include the Georgia native in this video would be unfair, as he's clearly proven he deserves a spot. But is he as great a champ as our next subject? Well, he'll have a tough time living up to it.
You can do your finisher on me.
Kevin Owens as the greatest NXT champion of all time. That's right, Kevin Owens
Of
has been
all
one of the best
time?
things in WWE
I
ever
don't
since he
know
debuted
about
the
that.
developmental brand in December
I even said
2014.
Kevin Owens at the
This
beginning,
wasn't a
I
slow
think.
rise to the top either, because mere hours after beating his first opponent, CJ Parker, someone better known to fans today as Bullet Club Gold's Juice Robinson, Kevin
Oh!
Owens stake his claim to the top prize by attacking then-champion Sami Zayn. Yes, the feud between the two real-life best friends had carried over into the WWE
I didn't know that.
system, and this meant
That's so
that
cool.
Just 2 months later at TakeOver
I love
Rival,
Juice Robinson.
Owens would get his shot at the gold, and in a moment would shock
Pow-
many, he'd actually win it.
Powerbomb.
And what followed on from there only further proved why the Quebec native is one of the best things going in wrestling today. As well, he was racking up defenses against the likes of Finn Balor and someone else we'll get to in a moment down on Tuesday nights. On Mondays, he was taking the NXT World title to Raw with him, and there, getting into a feud
With John Cena.
So in terms of how it elevated the strap then, this has to rank as one of the greatest reigns with the developmental title ever, if for no other
can't
reason
see
than
me.
now, fans of the main roster were getting to see the champ beat up the incumbent. So much of a star did it make.
I hate seeing that, or I love seeing that move, but like, I feel like it's so painful.
He'd segue onto the main roster full time.
Wait, he did that to Mark?
Almost as if he'd always been there. But what of the man who he successfully
That's
defended
crazy.
his gold
I
against
never
we
knew
alluded
that.
to a moment ago. After all, while this person may not have been able to win the title at that particular point in time, he'd later go on to have 3 separate runs of his own. That's right, it's time to talk about Samoa Joe. Okay, where do we start when it comes to praising Samoa Joe? Do we talk about his legendary run in Ring of Honor where he helped to legitimize their world title with a record 645-day reign?
Samoa
Or
Joe.
do we talk about his time in TNA where he was a pillar of the promotion? Or rather, do we
Joe.
talk about the fact
Joe.
that as it stands
Joe.
right now,
Joe.
at 44
Joe.
years old,
Joe.
he's still doing
Joe.
great by serving as the reigning and defending AEW World Champ? Well, all those achievements have been great.
My boy Joe, he's just an icon. Joe.
Let's focus on his time in NXT instead. And that's because, as we alluded to a moment ago, while there he became the only man to ever hold their top prize 3 times, with his first reign coming after he beat Finn Balor for it in April of 2016. Yes, we
That
were still in
man
the black and gold era of
clapped
NXT
him.
then, and so for wrestling fans everywhere, it was appointment viewing whenever the Orange County native defended his belt. It didn't matter who he was going up against, they'd all fall to the Samoan submission machine in the end.
Mojo?
Even when he briefly lost the belt to someone else,
I haven't
who
seen
pursued
that
it for
man
while,
in a
he
minute.
won it right back again in a rematch. And when, following a spell up on the main roster, he returned to the brand once more in 2021, he'd waste no time in turning himself into a 3-time champion. Sadly, though, this third run would be cut short before Joe could do much with it, as it ended with him being fired by the Fed for the second time in as many months. Regardless of this, however, it's undeniable that Samoa Joe deserves to be included in our video about all-time great NXT champions, as he's easily one of the most dominating the brand ever saw.
Yeah.
After all, few have the legitimacy he does in the sense that, if you were going to be forced to get into a fight with a member of the roster, he'd be one of the last people you'd pick. So maybe it's for the best he's moved on to AEW then, at least as far as the current crop of NXT stars are concerned anyway, because they
I
no
love
longer have to
Joe.
worry about getting choked out by him on a weekly basis. But Samoa Joe isn't the only great NXT champion who currently finds himself working over in Jacksonville. Has the same thing
Joe
to be
is
said about our
amazing.
next subject too, none other than Adam
Oh,
Cole.
I can't say I like him more than this guy, though.
Adam Cole was the leader
'Cause
of the
Adam
Undisputed Era,
Cole,
one of the most dominating
baby.
factions in WWE history, and a part of the reason he
I
was
love me
considered
some
so
Adam
dominating
Cole.
was, while the rest of his stable
Chugs
were
can
tripping
be
in
my
gold in other
dad.
respects, with Roderick Strong holding the North American title,
Not in a
and
gay
Kyle
way.
O'Reilly and Bobby Fish holding the tag team titles. He was standing tall as the
Teach me
NXT
how to
World
wrestle,
Champion.
Cole.
But this run was no normal reign.
I'll
No, at a full
legitimately give you
403
my
days
all.
in length, it still ranks as the longest run with that particular belt anyone has ever had to this day. That said, if
I just
someone
love
was going
Adam
to
Cole.
hold the record, why not Adam Cole? As he was so over in 2019 and 2020, it would have felt wrong to give it to anyone
Adam
else. Of course,
Cole,
when you have a string of
baby.
instant classics like he did as champion, though, that should come as no surprise. That's right, his bouts against Johnny Gargano alone are enough to merit his inclusion in this video. And even outside of that, his showdowns
That's
with
my
the likes of
favorite
Matt
match.
Riddle, Pete Dunne, and Keith Lee were all just as brilliant in their own ways. Really, you could make a solid argument for Adam Cole being the single greatest NXT champion of all time. Even
Mine.
better than everyone else we've discussed today. That said, there are some who would disagree with this statement, not because Adam Cole isn't great, rather simply because Shinsuke Nakamura is so great in his own right. I'm a fan of Japanese
Okay. I understand where you coming from. But also, I don't think he deserved that transition. I don't feel like his reign was anywhere close to Adam Cole's. Just saying. Any of them.
You'll have been all too aware of how great Shinsuke
Just
Nakamura
saying.
was. And so that was why, in 2016, once it was announced he'd signed on the dotted line with WWE and was going to be reporting to NXT imminently, many fans were waiting on tenterhooks. And he certainly didn't disappoint during that opening night in the brand as, alongside Sami Zayn, the King of Strong Style was able to put on an absolute clinic for all to see.
I love his moveset,
Then,
though.
once this was over and he'd established himself, he set about winning the big one, namely the NXT World title, with that being something he did a few months later at August 20th's TakeOver Brooklyn. And now that he had the gold around his waist, it
I like
didn't take
Shinsuke
Shinsuke long to
more
establish
now
himself as one
than
of
I
the
did
best
back
keepers of the
then,
belt by taking
but
on all comers,
I
whether
just-
that be
I
Samoa
just
Joe,
can't-
Eric Young, or Bobby Roode. Sure, he would briefly lose it to Joe at TakeOver Toronto in November of 2016, but he'd win it right back again just 1 month later in his home country of Japan, with this making the Kyoto native one of the rare people to have held the development brand's top prize more than once. And after that second reign was over, it wasn't long before he'd be main roster bound, with this being a run.
So is this guy counting, is Andy, are you counting both of his reigns?
Which might have had a spotty start on account of bad booking, but which has recently picked up some steam in 2023 and 2024. Of course, not everyone had a rough start on the main roster after serving a spell as NXT World Champion.
My boy
though, because
Dolph.
when it comes to our next subject, he segued from one to the other with ease. Who are we talking about this time? Like, who else but Seth Rollins?
Daddy
We all know how
Rollins.
dominating the Shield were between late 2012 and mid-2014, but it's easy to forget now that while Dean Ambrose was often the focus and Roman Reigns
How
was
could it
clearly
be
the
two
future
hot
project
guys
while
and
the
one
Hounds of
ugly
Justice
guy?
were undergoing their initial run, Seth Rollins was already a world champion by then. And no, we're not talking about his run as Ring of Honor World Champion under the name Tyler Black either. Rather, we are talking about the time he became the first ever NXT champion in July of 2012. That's right, if you look at the record books, it'll show that back before the black and gold brand became the phenomenon it would later become, a tournament was held to decide who would be the top
Tyler
going forward.
Black.
In the finals of that tournament, it would be
Ooh,
Seth Rollins
Dusty.
who beat Jinder Mahal to take home the gold
My
before
man.
anyone else. Of course, being the talent he is,
Dusty,
the Iowa
my
native
man.
wouldn't just rest on his laurels once he won the belt, as he'd go on to defend it against performers such as Michael McGillicuddy, Corey Graves, and Big E Langston over the
Corey
weeks that followed,
Graves.
proving that he was just as
Imagine.
good as he said he was.
Who
The only
remembers
issue we have
that?
with this run, in fact, is that it didn't happen at a time when more people were watching, because had Seth been a part of the roster during his glory days, then this one would likely be a lot better remembered. But even if he didn't have the same audience as some, it still earned a spot in today's video for historical purposes.
Wait. When was this?
If nothing else. After all, only one person can be the first, and if it had to be someone, WWE are no doubt happy it ended up being someone who went on to become arguably the best wrestler.
I
of
don't
his entire
remember
career.
that CM
And Seth
Punk
Rollins
thing
wasn't
at
the only
all.
great champion from the early days of NXT either, as the man who held it just 1 year
Bo.
later had something of an underrated run of his
Yes.
own, and that's our next subject, Bo Dallas. Now, in the annals
You
of
gotta
NXT Champions,
believe.
Bo Dallas is perhaps the most forgotten of all, as his reign came right before the brand exploded in popularity. But that doesn't mean it wasn't great.
Nah, Bo
The
was
opposite is,
great.
After beating Big E Langston,
Bo
to
was
take over
amazing.
himself on the May 23rd, 2013 episode of NXT.
They should have let
the
him
Delusion of
use
Heels on
Bo
the
leave
babyface
him
was able to
the
help
main
further
roster.
establish not only his title, but the brand itself.
Like, Bo
Really
is
had lot
a
to thank him for,
gem.
because had he not held down the fort,
I will vouch for Bo. Like, I just love going back to his promos. You gotta believe in yourself.
at this point, who knows if we'd ever have reached the heights of what came next. It certainly would have been a rougher transition, that's for sure. Hell, were he not there to get on fan?
I hope they do something like he's the recon or like something about Bray Wyatt and him, since all wrestling fans really kind of know now. And Bo Dallas isn't a bad wrestler. They just never let him wrestle. So I feel like let him cook, man. Let him cook.
Fans' nerves back in the early to mid 2010s and serve as an excellent foil to Sami Zayn, there's every chance the Quebec native's rise to the top wouldn't have had the same emotional impact it did. So never let it be forgotten that
Wait, was that El Generico taking off his mask?
while NXT has had a number of great champions over the years who have had a much higher profile at the time of their reign, Bo Dallas deserves to be counted amongst their ranks too, as he did a lot with a little.
And he
helped
got
prove
exclusive
early on that
footage I don't
the brand
know
could be more
about?
than just a simple developmental league.
Slide it over my way, boy.
Brand when it was operating at maximum capacity, something we would all see more clearly as time went on. But what of the man who beat Dallas for the gold? What of the man who's arguably served as the first champion of the golden era of NXT? That's who we're going to be looking at right now, Adrian Neville. Yes, when it comes to the greatest NXT champions of all time, we had to include the Newcastle native, as he was the one holding on to the title around the time the brand suddenly became the coolest thing in the industry. And what a perfect person
My
he was to
boy.
do this, as even back then, he
No,
was
I
killing it
never-
every time he stepped inside the squared circle in matches against
I
the likes
can't
of
say-
Tyler Breeze, Tyson Kidd, and Sami Zayn. Sure, he
I
may
can't
not
say
be
I don't like
in
Neville.
WWE
I
once
just
he hit the main
didn't watch
roster,
him.
and with there being so many
This
big
is the
names
time
who
I
came
quit.
after him that won the NXT title,
Like,
but that
whenever
should
he
never
got
take
to the
away
main
from the
roster, I
fact that
quit
whenever he
watching
was
wrestling
called upon
for
to
like
provide a banger
2
and
years.
further establish NXT
But
as
then
the
they
place to
reeled me
watch,
back in.
Pac always delivered. Just look at
Now
the
it's my
feud he had
favorite
with Sami
thing,
Zayn
baby.
in 2014. The same feud which eventually saw him drop the belt after holding on to it for 287 days. We mentioned earlier it had been Bo Dallas
Bo
who served as
Dallas.
the initial foil to the honorary Oos during his rise to the top, but it was Neville who got him past that finish line with a performance for the ages. More than that, though, what Pac really did for the NXT title was make it feel like the prize everyone wanted, as he was such an effective final boss at this point in his career. Sadly, however, he'd never reach that role again while under the WWE banner, as, after being called up to the main roster, he'd be subject to some questionable booking, which eventually led to him leaving the promotion altogether in 2018, and later joining AEW. But when it comes to our next subject, he never had to leave WWE, because by the time he reached
Johnny's
the main
not
roster,
in here?
it was around the point Triple H was starting to take over control.
Okay.
And it's all just as well the game was booking
Tommaso
Tommaso Ciampa then, as he knew exactly what to
Ciampa.
do with him, something which was evident in the Blackheart's own run as NXT champion in 2018. Of course, Ciampa's time as champ was elevated by the fact
is
that he
amazing.
came right around the peak of his feud with Johnny Gargano, probably still the best storyline the developmental brand have done to this day. And it all began with those two breaking up when the Boston native turned on the beloved babyface. Then, once that was done, in order to really
Mm-hmm. That
stick the knife
storyline
and
was
get further
amazing.
into Johnny's head, Ciampa went after the thing he coveted the most, the NXT World title. Sure, it wouldn't be an easy task to dethrone Aleister Black, the man then holding the strap, but Tommaso proved up to
Aleister
the
Black
task
was
when the time
sick.
finally came for the
Black
two to meet
masks
on
nobody
July
ever
18th,
kicked out of.
2018 episode of the Black and Gold brand.
AEW
And once
kinda
he
fumbled
beat the
him.
Dutchman, it was off to the races for the heel, as he
By
instantly
fumbled, I
became
mean,
the most
just
hated
don't
man
use him.
in the entire company. All anyone wanted to see was for someone
Hey.
to beat him, but no matter who was placed on the opposite side.
Man, like, I used to like AEW so much, but I feel like I could book a better show than AEW.
For the ring from the champ, he always had an answer, and that's exactly what led to him successfully defending against the likes of EC3 and Dominic Dijakovic. Sure, as a result of
As
his
y'all can
injury,
see, my
the
cat
whole
just
thing
keeps
never got the
going
blow-off it
in
deserved,
and
with
out.
Gargano finally overcoming him, but this wouldn't matter in the long run, as
Just
years
let him
later
be.
in 2021, the Blackheart got a second run with the belt, this time right as NXT was morphing into its 2.0.
You want to watch it with me?
So obviously then his role at this point was to act as an established star who could get a younger performer over, something he did when he put over Braun Breaker in January January of 2022. And that marked the last time Tommaso Ciampa would hold on to the NXT World title to date, though there's always a chance he'll return to Tuesday nights and win it back again in the future. But then there's always the chance
No, it's
anyone
not.
we've discussed today could return to NXT for another...
Alright. Don't think I forgot about you, Timmy. Eat your fucking vitamins. Alright, I'll see y'all fuckers later.